What if I told you there's a creature living right beneath your feet that makes a great white shark look like an amateur? A predator so bizarrely engineered by evolution that scientists have spent decades trying to fully understand how it works. And here's the wild part. It weighs less than a chocolate bar. Today, we're talking about the star-nosed mole. And by the end of this video, you are going to look at the ground you walk on very differently. Before we get into the really insane stuff, let me just paint you a picture. You're standing in a wetland meadow somewhere in eastern North America. Underneath you, in a network of dark, flooded tunnels, something is hunting. It cannot see well. It cannot hear anything particularly useful, but it is detecting, identifying, and consuming prey faster than your brain can consciously process a single image. This little creature, roughly the size of your fist, is operating at the absolute edge of what biology allows. And that star on its face, that weird, alien-looking ring of pink flesh, is the key to everything. So let's start with the obvious question. What even is that star? The star-nosed mole has 22 fleshy appendages arranged in a perfect ring around the tip of its nose. These aren't tentacles. They aren't antennae. They are highly mobile, exquisitely sensitive sensory organs. And the number that will genuinely stop you in your tracks is this. That star contains more than 25,000 minute sensory receptors, called Eimer's organs. 25,000. Packed into a surface area roughly the size of your fingertip. When neuroscientists began mapping how much of this mole's brain is dedicated to processing information from the star, they found something remarkable. The star represents about half the animal's entire somatosensory cortex. Half. For a structure that takes up a tiny fraction of its body. To put that in perspective, think about your own hands. Your hands are extraordinarily sensitive compared to, say, your back. And humans dedicate a disproportionately large portion of their brain to processing sensory input from their hands and fingers. That's why surgeons and musicians develop such refined motor control. The brain invests heavily in the body parts we rely on most. Now imagine that same level of neural investment, but cranked up to an almost absurd degree, concentrated in the tip of a nose no bigger than a coin. That is the star-nosed mole. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Within those 22 rays of the star, there's a hierarchy. The two rays at the very center bottom, rays 11 and 10 if you want to get technical about it, are smaller than the others, but they are the most sensitive. Researchers call the area they cover the star's fovea, borrowing the term from visual science. In your eye, the fovea is the tiny central region of your retina where your vision is sharpest. The star-nosed mole has essentially built an equivalent structure, but for touch. When the mole touches something with its star, it sweeps those central rays across the object of interest, the same way your eyes dart around to focus the fovea on specific details. The mole is essentially looking with its nose, using touch the way most animals use sight. Now let's talk about speed, because this is where things get genuinely surreal. The star-nosed mole holds a record that is almost impossible to believe. It is the fastest eating mammal on Earth. Researchers clocked these animals identifying and consuming prey in as little as 120 milliseconds. Some individuals managed it in under that. To give you a reference point, a human blink takes between 150 and 400 milliseconds. This mole is finding, confirming, and eating something in less time than it takes you to blink. The neural pathway from detection to decision to action is so compressed, so optimized, that the animal is essentially operating on the edge of what the laws of physics allow for biological systems. There is almost no delay between sensation and response. And why does speed matter so much? Because the star-nosed mole lives in an environment that is genuinely brutal in a specific way. It spends most of its life in dark, flooded tunnels. It forages along stream bottoms. It can swim. It can even smell underwater, which we will get to in a moment. The food it eats, earthworms, aquatic insects, small fish, crustaceans, is mobile, small, and scattered. Every second of foraging is energetically expensive. A mole that takes 2 seconds to evaluate prey when it could take a fraction of a second is a mole that starves. Evolution has been applying pressure to that processing speed for millions of years, and the result is a predator operating on a timescale that blurs the line between reflex and cognition. Let's take a moment to appreciate the broader context here, because I think it's easy to hear these facts and think, okay, cool animal, weird nose, fast eater. But what the star-nosed mole actually represents is something much deeper. It is a perfect case study in what happens when evolution optimizes a single sensory system beyond what we think is possible. Every other predator we typically celebrate, the cheetah, the peregrine falcon, the mantis shrimp, those animals are famous because we can see what they do. We watch a cheetah run, and our brains immediately register that as impressive. But the star-nosed mole is doing something equally spectacular, in a domain we can't directly observe or appreciate with our own senses. It is a tactile genius in a world of visual mediocrity, and that invisibility is exactly why it doesn't get the attention it deserves. Now let's get into the underwater angle, because this is another layer that most people don't know about. Smelling underwater sounds physically impossible, right? Scent detection requires molecules to contact sensory receptors, and in air-breathing mammals, those receptors are designed for airborne chemicals, not dissolved ones. But the star-nosed mole has been observed doing something extraordinary when foraging in water. It blows tiny air bubbles out of its nostrils, and then immediately inhales them back in. What it's doing is essentially sampling the water for chemical signatures. Those exhaled bubbles pick up dissolved compounds in the water, and when the mole inhales them back, those compounds reach its olfactory receptors. It is, functionally, sniffing underwater. And it's not alone in this. A close relative, the water shrew, does something similar. But the star-nosed mole combines this ability with everything else we've described, creating a predator that operates simultaneously across multiple sensory dimensions that most mammals can't access at all. Think about that combination. You have tactile sensitivity, so refined it can identify prey in under 1/10 of a second. You have the ability to chemically sample an aquatic environment. You have 25,000 sensory receptors feeding into a massively dedicated neural processing system. You have the physical capability to swim and forage in flooded tunnels. Each individual adaptation is impressive. Together, they create something that is arguably the most comprehensively specialized sensory predator among mammals. I want to pause here and address something that I think is worth sitting with for a moment. We talk a lot about intelligence when we discuss animal predators. We talk about wolves cooperating, about dolphins strategizing, about crows using tools. And the implication is often that intelligence is the highest form of predatory evolution. But the star-nosed mole challenges that framing entirely. This animal isn't outsmarting its prey. It isn't planning. It isn't cooperating. What it's doing is something arguably more elegant. It has reduced the gap between stimulus and response so dramatically that planning becomes unnecessary. It's not smarter than its prey. It's faster than its prey's ability to escape once detected. That's a completely different evolutionary solution to the same problem, and it's one that required not more brainpower overall, but rather an extraordinary reorganization of how that brainpower is allocated. The neuroscience here is worth going a little deeper on, because the brain organization of the star-nosed mole has genuinely informed human neuroscience research. When researchers map the cortical organization of the star-nosed mole, they see what scientists call a sensory homunculus, a map of the body on the brain, that is almost entirely dominated by the star. Just as a classic diagram of the human sensory brain shows enormous hands and lips and a tiny torso, the mole's brain map shows an enormous star and relatively little else. This has been used as a compelling example in neuroscience to illustrate the concept of cortical magnification. The idea that the brain dedicates neural real estate not proportional to physical size, but proportional to functional importance. The mole has essentially voted evolutionarily on what matters most, and the answer is overwhelmingly clear. What's also fascinating is the developmental question of how this star forms in the first place. The star is present at birth, but the 22 rays are initially fused together and separate shortly after. The developmental pathway that creates this structure is still being studied, but it represents a remarkable example of how genetic programs can produce highly specific, functionally complex anatomical structures through what appears to be a relatively straightforward developmental sequence. The star isn't a random mutation that stuck around. It's an elaborately programmed structure that requires precise timing, precise positioning of those 22 rays, and precise connectivity with the nervous system. Evolution didn't just stumble onto the star, it built it. Now, I want to bring in a comparison that I think really crystallizes why this animal is so special. Consider the platypus. The platypus is another mammal famous for its bizarre anatomy, and it uses electroreception, the ability to detect electrical fields generated by muscle movement in prey, to hunt underwater. It's a remarkable adaptation, and it generates a lot of justified wonder. But here's the thing, the platypus is slow about it, relatively speaking. It hunts by scooping up sediment and filtering through it, processing what it finds. The star-nosed mole, by contrast, is a high-speed tactile assassin. It makes contact, makes a decision, and acts, all within a time window that makes the platypus look leisurely. Both animals represent extraordinary evolutionary engineering, but the mole is operating at a higher clock speed, and that difference in temporal performance is what earns it the title of most anatomically specialized predator on Earth. Let's also talk briefly about what the star-nosed mole eats, because the diversity of its diet actually reveals something important about the generality of its adaptations. It eats earthworms, which it encounters in its tunnel systems. It eats aquatic insects and their larvae. It catches small fish. It consumes crustaceans in wetland environments. It isn't a specialist locked onto one prey type. That star works as a universal sensory tool across an enormous range of prey items and environments. A predator that can detect a worm underground, an insect in water, and a small fish in a stream using the same sensory apparatus is a predator that has solved multiple ecological challenges with a single evolutionary innovation. That's efficiency at a level that is genuinely hard to overstate. And all of this, let's remember, is happening in an animal that people regularly walk past without noticing. The star-nosed mole isn't a deep-sea creature requiring a submarine to observe. It's not living in some remote rainforest accessible only by expedition. It's living in the wetlands and forests of eastern North America and eastern Canada. It might literally be in a park near you right now. This is, in many ways, the most extraordinary animal you've never really thought about. Here's what I think the star-nosed mole forces us to confront. We have a very visual-centric view of the world. Our dominant sense is sight. Our primary metaphors are visual. The star-nosed mole is living proof that evolution has found solutions to predation that are, by certain objective measures, more impressive than anything happening in the visible, photogenic parts of the animal kingdom. We just can't easily see it, so we tend to underestimate it. If you really want to appreciate the scale of what this animal does, try this thought experiment. Imagine having a prosthetic tip placed on your finger that could identify any object you touched in under 1/10 of a second, and simultaneously provide chemical information about what that object is. Imagine that data being processed so fast that by the time you're consciously aware you touch something, you've already made a complete decision about what to do with it. That is the daily reality of the star-nosed mole. Every single foraging excursion, every contact with the substrate, every brush against an earthworm or insect larva. Instant, accurate, actionable information processed faster than consciousness. There's a philosophical dimension here that I find genuinely exciting, and I think it's worth ending on. The star-nosed mole represents a kind of intelligence that we don't usually label as intelligence. It isn't reasoning. It isn't planning. But it is an information processing system of extraordinary refinement, one that has solved a fundamental biological problem: how to find and consume enough calories to survive, more efficiently than almost any other mammal. And it did so by evolving a structure that has no real parallel in the natural world. The star isn't like anything else. It's a genuinely novel solution. And in biology, genuine novelty is rare and precious. We spend a lot of time celebrating animal intelligence and animal strength and animal speed, and all of those things are worth celebrating. But the star-nosed mole asks us to celebrate something different. It asks us to celebrate sensory refinement as a form of greatness. It asks us to look at the ground, at the dark, flooded places where this animal hunts in total obscurity, and recognize that some of the most extraordinary biology on Earth happens where we can't easily watch it. So the next time you're walking through a wetland or a forest in eastern North America and you feel the ground beneath you, remember what might be down there. Something with 22 rays of pure sensory power on its face, blowing bubbles underwater to smell its prey, eating faster than you can blink, operating at the absolute limit of what mammalian biology can achieve. That is the star-nosed mole. And it has been quietly being extraordinary for longer than our species has existed to appreciate it. If that doesn't make you look at the natural world a little differently, I don't know what will. Make sure you subscribe if you want more deep dives into the animal kingdom's most underappreciated stories, because we are just getting started.